Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
Oh. Does Ukraine have biological weapons? Ukraine has biological research facilities. What? You mean secret biolabs? Like the secret biolabs Ukraine definitely doesn't have? Ukraine has those? Yes, it does. And not only does Ukraine have secret biolabs, Toria Nuland said, whatever they're doing in those labs is so dangerous and so scary that she is, quote, quite concerned that the so-called research material inside those biolabs might fall into the hands of Russian forces. Try not to use profanity on the air to describe our reaction. Our jaws drop.
If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Okay, just get a pen. It's a classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they are planning to do themselves. That's what Toria Nuland said. We almost laughed out loud. So what you're saying, Toria Nuland, if, for example, you were funding secret biolabs in Ukraine but wanted to hide that fact from the people who are paying for it, in whose name you were doing it, then you might lie about it by claiming the Russians were lying about it. In other words, you might mount a disinformation campaign by claiming the other guy was mounting a disinformation campaign. Is that what you're saying, Toria Nuland? Then you have to open your mind a little bit and at least assess what other people are saying. So here was the Russian claim. Watch.
During the course of the special military operation, facts were uncovered of the Kyiv regime mopping up traces of military biological program under development in Ukraine, financed by the U.S. Defense Ministry.
Separately, a Russian foreign ministry spokesman said the Ukrainians were working on deadly pathogens, including plague and anthrax. Is that true? Now, obviously, we would not take Russia's word for that, ever, but we don't have to take Russia's word for that. The U.S. Defense Department has a website that contains this media clip about the opening of a biological research facility in Ukraine in 2010. Quote, U.S. Senator Dick Lugar applauded the opening of the interim Central Reference Laboratory in Odessa, Ukraine this week, announcing that it will be instrumental in researching dangerous pathogens used by bioterrorists. The Level 3 biosafety lab will be used to study anthrax, tularemia, and Q fever, as well as other dangerous pathogens. Oh, okay. Then the National Pulse dug up a 2011 report from the U.S. National Academy of Sciences that also explained that the Odessa-based laboratory, quote, is responsible for the identification of especially dangerous biological pathogens. So what we're doing, this is not the first time you've heard this story, we are funding the creation of deadly pathogens so we can study them and prevent people from getting infected with them, maybe? There are lots of... The telling thing is that the U.S. Embassy's website also contains links to fact sheets about America's support for biological research in Ukraine, but all those links are now dead. That's weird. It's our government. We pay for it. Again, they're there in our name, in the name of American citizens, but we can no longer read their webpage? How does that work exactly? They have no right to lie to us. The webpage is archived, thankfully, and the fact sheets show Defense Department funding to laboratories in Ukraine. So that looks like proof. It's not Russian disinformation, it's totally real. Sorry, USA Today, America's newspaper, it's real. You can look it up on the internet if you want.
The Russian accusations are absurd, they're laughable, and, you know, in the words of my Irish Catholic grandfather, a bunch of malarkey. There's nothing to it. It's classic Russian propaganda. And I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't give it a drop of ink worth paying attention to.
Yeah, but can you explain to us has there been any relationship between the...
We are not developing biological or chemical weapons inside Ukraine. It's not happening.
If I were you, I wouldn't devote a drop of ink to it. First of all, you didn't get to make that decision, Mr. Bureaucrat. We have a free press in this country. You don't get to decide. But you'll notice at the end of that, Kirby refuses to answer the question. Has there been a relationship between the U.S. Pentagon and a bioweapons facility in Ukraine? And if so, what is that relationship? That's Russian disinformation. What's the answer? We're not developing WMD in Ukraine right now. Okay, got it. Okay. If these are purely defensive labs, why was Toria Nuland so concerned that Russians would get a hold of the materials from these facilities? Other world powers have come to the obvious conclusion. Again, we hate to do this, but under these circumstances, we asked our own spokespeople. They lied. We're going to the Foreign Ministry of China, a country we despise. Here's what they said today. They're calling on weapons inspectors to take a look at these facilities in Ukraine right away.
Over the past 2 decades, the United States has been blocking the establishment of a verification regime to the Biological Weapons Convention and refused to accept the inspection of biological facilities within and outside its borders. The move has further aggravated the concern of the international community. We once again urge the U.S. to provide full clarification of its biomilitarization activities within and outside its borders and accept multilateral verification.
Oh, they're putting Russian, Chinese propaganda on the screen. Yeah, we did. We also put U.S. government propaganda on the screen. And the difference is we expect to be lied to by foreign governments. We're not globalists. We believe in one country. It's this country, the United States. We do not expect to be lied to by our government, and we won't accept it. One of the few adults we know in the foreign policy realm is Tulsi Gabbard, the former member of Congress from Hawaii, and we're happy to have her join us tonight. Congresswoman, thanks so much for coming on. So it's without even going into what they told us was Russian disinformation is actually true, how concerned are you that Toria Nuland, who's overseeing this war, has just admitted there are unsecure bioagents, dangerous bioagents in Ukraine?
I'm extremely concerned, as should be every American and everyone in the world. The seriousness of this situation really can't be overstated. First of all, she didn't say no when she was asked by Marco Rubio about there being biological or chemical weapons in Ukraine. So if there were or are, obviously that would be a violation of the Biological Weapons Convention. Number two, they're categorically been trying to hide this, as you've laid out very, very well. And then once they were found out, rather than saying, hey, you know what, this is a critical emergency, it's a crisis, we have these pathogens in the midst of a war zone, not just in one location, but between 20 and 30 labs in Ukraine. This is a global crisis, we're going to take action immediately. This is how a responsible leader would react given the crisis of this moment. But instead, what did they do? Her response to Senator Rubio was immediately start pointing fingers. We're going to preemptively start the blame game should anything happen to these pathogens and who knows what is going on in these labs. Before anything bad happens, just say, you know what, it's the bad guys. It's the bad guys who are responsible for this. It is the height of irresponsibility. Their response to this, the fact that they're covering it up, the fact that they aren't doing really what needs to be done, because unless this war in Ukraine ends right now, ends tonight, we face a very real certainty that one or more of these labs will be compromised, will be breached, and it won't just be the people of Ukraine who are impacted. We could face another global crisis when you look at a pathogen that could be released. We just went through this with COVID. We can't have forgotten this already.
So we're just getting this from the State Department. This is a tweet, and I'm reading this cold, but I want to run it by you. The United States does not have chemical or biological weapons labs in Ukraine. Then they put up a graphic that read, the U.S. is in full compliance with its obligations under the Biological Weapons Convention and does not develop or possess biological weapons anywhere. Now, I can see about 4 holes in that. So if you were, so they're telling us they don't own any biolabs in Ukraine. I don't remember, one of the tells to lying is when you answer a question no one asked. I don't think anyone's suggesting the U.S. government owns biolabs there, right?
That's right. That's right. But you pointed to evidence, and we've seen through different parts of the world. We saw in China how the U.S. is funding this research or these labs to the tune of hundreds around the world. Why? That question has never been asked or answered by them. Say, why is it? Why is this research something that is so critical, not done in secure labs within the United States? Why is this research being outsourced? There's so many different questions here, and all of it points back to really the risk that this is posing. Again, this is something that is fresh in our memories, and if they have nothing to hide, why are they trying so hard to hide it?
Well, they've already admitted it. I mean, the Undersecretary of State just admitted it under oath yesterday. So, like, let's not let them pretend that this is like we're carrying Putin's water again, or they're such liars. I appreciate having an honest person on this show. It's such a relief. Tulsi Gabbard, thank you. It's absurd when you think about it, so don't think about it. And that was the point of today's coverage of the Biden administration's secret Ukrainian biolabs. Stop thinking about it. Start accepting what they tell you at face value. Otherwise, you are an agent of Russia. Here's CNN.
The foreboding music. Biohazard warnings. This Russian state media footage from 2015 claims to show America running facilities in Ukraine and Georgia that caused deadly outbreaks of disease and killed local livestock. This story is false, but that has not stopped it continuing to circulate, evolving from biological hazards to biological weapons and becoming a key part of Russia's disinformation campaign, justifying the invasion of Ukraine. The claims were debunked several years ago when, in 2020, the United States issued a statement to, quote, set the record straight, explaining the facilities are, in fact, for vaccine development and to report outbreaks caused by dangerous pathogens before they pose security or stability threats.
These claims were debunked several years ago. These facilities work on vaccines and reporting outbreaks. And then they play Russian propaganda. The point is, anyone who asks questions about this is repeating Russian propaganda. Got it? We do know that the Pentagon talking points you saw reported as fact on television today and last night were an utter lie. Did the reporters who repeated those talking points verbatim know they were a lie? Maybe they did. On the other hand, how would they know? They didn't bother to do any reporting whatsoever. They got a text from some Biden administration flack and they just read it on the air like it was true. You shouldn't be surprised because that's what they do. And it's possible they're afraid not to do that. They know if they stray from the script the White House has written for them, they'll be denounced from the briefing room as tools of Putin. Here's Biden's publicist doing that very same thing today.
The main issue that prompted my Twitter thread yesterday was that Russia has a history also of inventing outright lies like this, which is the suggestion that the United States has a chemical and biological weapons program, or Ukraine does, that they're operating. Russia is the country that has a chemical and biological weapons program. So the objective was to make clear the inaccuracy of the information, the misinformation they're trying to put out, and make clear to the world that they not only have the capacity, they have a history of using chemical and biological weapons, and that in this moment we should have our eyes open.
Yeah, but no one denies that. That's the thing. No one denies that Russia has a chem bio program. That's bad. No one denies that Russia lies, of course, and has for a long time. That Russian propaganda is absolutely real, of course. That's not up for debate. That's all true. The question is, why is the United States funding these biolabs that are not doing anything close to what the Pentagon claims they are doing? Why is the White House press secretary from the podium contradicting what the director of the Pentagon's Bioweapons Control Program has already admitted is true? It's clearly a case where the U.S. government has been lying, has mounted a disinformation campaign, if you will, designed to cover up what it's doing, and nobody in the press corps seems interested in finding out what's at the bottom of this. Why is that?
Right. So first of all, like you, I've heard the Russian and Chinese accusations for weeks that the United States is partnering with Ukraine to have biolabs right on the other side of the Russian border, and never talked about it because there was never any evidence for it. I don't take the word of the Russians or the Chinese for it. What made me get interested in the story was when Victoria Nuland went before the Senate and Marco Rubio asked her, are there biological and chemical weapons programs in Ukraine, expecting her, he even said, I only have a minute, her to say no, of course not, so he could then claim it was debunked. But she didn't say no. In fact, she acknowledged exactly what you just went through, that not only are there labs, but they're so dangerous, whatever's in them, that they're deeply concerned it would fall into Russian hands. The other point is, any journalist who comes on the air and says that they can claim, that they can state that these concerns are false or a byproduct of disinformation, like journalists have been doing for weeks under the guise of fact-checking, is not telling the truth. All they know is that the Pentagon denies it, the CIA tells them it's not true, and then they equate that, they conflate that with proven fact, which is the #1 problem in journalism that we're seeing very pervasively in this war.
It's so shameful that anybody employed as a reporter would do something like that without doing any actual reporting whatsoever, even bothering to learn about the subject, and then to scold anyone for asking legitimate questions. So here's the problem that I have with it. Government does things that are secret. We don't always know what they are. Maybe some cases that's legitimate. But to attack anyone who, American citizens who ask honest questions as tools of Russia, seems to me so far out of bounds, I'm worried this is being established as a precedent.
Well, as we know, this has been going on for 5 or 6 years, that anybody who questions the predominant mainstream narrative from the media, from the Democratic Party, are tools of Vladimir Putin, are Kremlin agents, are sympathizers for Moscow. This has been their tactic forever, and obviously it's escalated now. But the one point I want to make, Tucker, is when the government comes out and emphatically denies that they have biological weapons, we know they're not telling the truth. Remember the anthrax attacks right after 9/11? They were incredibly terrifying because of how weaponized they were. First, the government said it was from al-Qaeda, then they said it was from Saddam Hussein. In 2008, they said, we solved the case. Actually, it came from a U.S. Army lab, from an infectious disease specialist under the auspices of Tony Fauci, a scientist who cultivated these weaponized strains of anthrax and deployed them on U.S. soil. We know they did the same thing with the coronavirus, where they manipulated the coronavirus to become more lethal and more contagious. They claim that those aren't biological weapons because inside their brain, their intention is not to use them, but just to study them. But the things they're making are exactly the same as what you would make if you were to make biological weapons. And you have to be so careful to understand what they mean when they deny that they have these.
Well, the last question, maybe you don't know the answer, but why Ukraine? You know, of all the countries you would conduct this kind of research in, you would pick one with like a solid medical infrastructure. You'd pick Germany or Israel or someplace with, you know, first-class scientific research going on. You would not pick Ukraine. Why Ukraine?
Unless you viewed Russia as your primary threat, unless you wanted to be provocative toward the Russians, unless you wanted to be in Ukraine developing all sorts of weapons, as we clearly have been. We've been flooding that country with lethal arms for 5 or 6 years. So clearly there's an intention for the United States to be heavily involved in Ukraine. The Russians say their motive is to be threatening and provocative. The United States denies that. But they have their tentacles in Ukraine and have for many years all the time, which is a critical part of the narrative that has been lacking.